On this Meet the Team, I am joined by Nate Broyles. Nate, where are you joining us from?
Hello, I'm joining from New York City.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what do you do at Chronosphere? What's your job title? That's not always the same thing. So
Yes, it's a great question. So I'm a software engineer. I guess technically member of technical staff is how we say on the control team. So we're kind of one of the teams responsible for ownership of M3. M3 being the core database that powers a lot of what we do here. We specifically focus on just ensuring that we have the ability to control users' access to the database resources. If they're ever trying to kind of go off that path, we are able to ground them in without causing any kind of issues for the underlying data store itself. And then also try and educate them on ways to better execute their queries or their rights so that they kind of stay on the golden path, right?
I think I might dig into that a little bit more when we get to some of the other questions. There's some things you said there that I would like to know a bit more detail on, but let's get the introductions out the way first. Sure. What were some of the reasons you decided to join Chronosphere?
Let's see. I had the opportunity to work with Matt Mihik, who's the head of engineering. Before he was a boss at a previous company, and really enjoyed working with him. Really got to trust his engineering acumen, business acumen. And so when I was kind of looking for the next thing, I called Matt just on unrelated reasons, to just helping with the job search and things like that. And once we finished our conversation, he kind of pitched me on Chronosphere, and having been at places before where this was metrics observability was a huge problem, and we went through a few different vendors. I knew that what Chronosphere was attempting to solve was actually something that was a big problem for people, and had a real opportunity. And then I got to learn the backstory about how Chronosphere came to be. I had the opportunity to meet Martin and Rob, and I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. I didn't plan on joining a Series B startup. I think that was a little bit too early for my taste at this point in my life, But I think having all those factors kind of outlined in front of me, and it made me feel much more comfortable, and thinking that this is a place that is solving a real problem and have the right people in place to have a real future for the company.
Okay, so where were you before? What was this mysterious non-series?
I don't know how much I can talk about or not talk about. I don't swear.
Okay.
And so I was there for about 6.5 years. I learned a ton there. I think it was probably one of the most rewarding jobs I had, because it really, I think, helped me mature and become a much better engineer. Met some super talented folks, some who I'm really fortunate enough to work with again today. So I'm really grateful for that. And then, Matt was my old boss when we were working on Cash App, which was kind of a fraction or a portion of Square.
It's not something we get here, but I've certainly heard of it.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying, man. We're trying. It's a slog to get out beyond just the U.S., especially with regulatory stuff. But I think they're making more progress.
I think unfortunately it's probably too late. We have our own local alternatives now.
Yeah, I can 100% believe that.
But they do have their problems. So, all right. I've got a question here. I'm going to see what your answer is, and then I might have some follow-up questions based on your first answer. Okay. What is the most interesting technical challenge you think Chronosphere is solving?
That's a good one. I think it's just the sheer magnitude of data that is coming into the system, right? Our whole value proposition is look, man, you can send just a ton of writes, all this time series data to us, no problem. We'll store it and we'll serve you back these nice graphs, whenever you want, right? For over whatever kind of time scale you want, in a response that time that you'll find acceptable. And that's very easy to state, but that's very difficult to actually do, right? There's a lot of work that has to go on behind the scenes, from the data store itself being able to just simply handle that volume, that amount of data, to all the way up to the front end being able to properly present that much data, right? It affects every aspect of what we do here at Chronosphere. So I think the biggest technical challenge is simply what we've set out to actually solve, which is like handling the sheer amount of volume that our customers send to us.
Mm-hmm. And actually coming back to your initial answer then, I'd like to know, when you say you educate people, I assume you mean customers, on of the best way to do things. What's like the balancing act there of that, that classic answer of you're holding it wrong to trying to be more constructive and more friendly than that to help people understand that something, the underlying way that queries are constructed in Chronosphere and many tools like it is still quite complex as well. So getting that balance right. How do you handle that?
I mean, I think it's actually kind of unfortunate. I think we haven't had to worry about that balance too much just yet because we haven't done much of that education. I think that is like kind of the next evolution of things that we'll want to dig into. For example, we have this tool, like this live profiler, right, that helps you understand the cardinality of the time series that are coming in. And I think that is one example of education, right? It's like, hey, this time series that you have added or modified has this really high cardinality. And it kind of relies on the end user or the customer to make that next connection and be like, hey, I should probably reduce that. Like, I think ideally we would get to a next step where we start doing things that are a little bit more proactive, a little less like, requires deduction. We say, hey, we notice this query is like really expensive. If you apply this roll-up rule, it would be faster and also, probably store less data, right? If you drop the underlying data. So I think, like we're like very early. We're very early days in that aspect of controls mantra. I think the protection aspect, is where we kind of focused our energies the most as we begin, because, before we can even educate you, we've got to make sure that everything stays up and is running the way that you expect it to be, right? So we kind of prioritize that, but I think the education stuff will eventually follow suit for sure.
And if the concept of roll-up rules and also recording rules intrigues you and you're reading the text version of this, head over to the blog. There's a post about the difference. So, anyway, okay. What are you working on right now or currently that you're really excited about?
So right now I'm actually working on, I think I'm working on something that I think a lot of people will not find exciting, but I find exciting. And
the question is about what you find exciting. So
yes, that's true. That is true. That's correct. I think, there's a lot of work we've done over the last year, again, around protection, around resilience, around performance, to just ensure that you're getting the best experience that you can, possibly have when you're using Chronosphere. But there's also, stuff that's less directly related to that is really, really important. And so what I'm currently focusing on right now is getting integration tests in place that spin up the components of M3 in process or in memory and have them be able to talk to each other, right? And so like we have unit tests in place. We have some things we call scenario tests, which spin up and do like long running activities within a cluster, like add a node, add a namespace, right? Make sure all that stuff is working properly. But we don't really have good integration tests that allow us to do intercomponent communication, right? So like having an aggregator, a DB node, and a coordinator spun up and have them all talk to each other. We have some versions of them. We actually have 2 iterations, but they all require Docker containers to be spun up. And then those Docker containers like talk to each other. And that's fine. That works for correctness. But man, it really is difficult when you're trying to like iterate and make changes very quickly because you have to like then rebuild your image and spin up a new Docker container. And then it makes debuggability very difficult because you have to actually like attach a remote debugger to a Docker container. And then it needs to be built a specific way to actually allow that. It's just like a lot of things, right? When it would be super convenient if you could just go to your IDE and you could just click run the same way you run like a unit test. And you say, hey, I want a new DB node. I want a new aggregator, a new coordinator. And they all just come up and they all know how to talk to each other. And you can start issuing commands via the public API. And that's kind of what I'm working on tackling right now. And this is really born out of just the frustration that several engineers on M3 team have had as we were building out these previous features. And so I know when people talk about tests, sometimes their eyes kind of glaze over. But I'm actually really excited about this. And I think this is going to be, it's really going to help us in some of the future work that we have going forward as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're telling me that containers are not the answer to everything?
I mean, there's no classic phrase, but there's no silver bullet, right? There's no silver bullet for sure.
That's very true. I think the testing aspect is. I do believe you also. I think you have a blog post that you wrote as well on this subject.
I have not, but maybe I will.
I'll cut that. I thought you did, but I'll cut that. Okay. I know I'm working on one from Artem, but I don't know when it'll be. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to plug that if it's not ready.
Someone maybe signed me up. I don't know. Maybe I got volunteered, Chris, so it's fine.
I'm not sure. No, whatever it was, I thought was published. So I don't know. Anyway, cut. Okay. All right. Okay. So that's the serious questions, and I actually thank you for your very in-depth answers. That's
sure.
Some nice in-depth knowledge and details of what you're working on there. But let's get to the fun, more about you stuff.
Great.
What's a fun fact about you that nobody would guess?
Oh man, a fun fact. Let's see. I love roller skating, like classic quad skating, and I grew up next to a skating ring, so I'm actually pretty decent. And every Sunday. Not every Sunday, but fairly often I'll go out to the park and I'll like roller skate. And I don't know, I really enjoy it. And it's having a revival right now. So it feels really like a bit of a vindication because, for a long time, people, thought I was like a dinosaur, this like roller skater guy. But we're back, it's great. It feels good. It feels good to be on, on trend again or whatever.
Yep. It's really popular here. The old American airport in Tempelhof. Is because it's an old airport. It's great for roller skating.
That's incredible. Yeah.
And they're there every day probably, but Sunday. There was actually an article about all these generations of people roller skating there on the weekends.
That's awesome.
I have to find one I can send it to you.
Yeah.
All right. If you're this kind of person, and I'm discovering slowly that Chronospherians are not often this kind of person, and you put stickers in your laptop, apart from company stickers, what do you have? Or what would you have?
Oh man, yeah, I have no stickers. I'm sorry, I'm a Luddite.
No. Most people at the company don't, so you're okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I just I don't know. I never got into it, and then I kind of just it never was. But if you have stickers on your laptop, I think that's awesome. I think it's whatever works for you.
All right then. I'm trying to imagine what this could be if it was on roller skates. But if you're an animal, what would you be?
Okay. Oh, I actually know the answer to this one. I've known it for a while. Like the three-toed sloth, I think is one of my favorite animals. It's just super lazy. It comes down like once a week to like do its business. Otherwise, it's just hanging out in the trees. It has like this little goofy smile on its face all the time. And that feels like, that's just like the kind of energy that I want to project, like I'm just taking it easy, I'm having a good time. I'm trying to, mosey my way through life. So that would be me.
All right. I feel like I've gone from a question with a kind of a stupid answer now to a somewhat more serious question. Who is someone you've considered a role model and how have they helped you guide you in your career or your life generally?
That's interesting. It's interesting. Well, it's kind of twofold, right? Like I think my parents, I think the world of them. They really just provided, a good example on like work ethic and, like just good, I think like a moral compass, I feel, and just like how to try and be the best person you can be, right? Yeah. Like, and realizing that nobody's perfect, but just trying to do the best that you can, right? So I feel like my parents really gave me a solid footing. And I think the older I get, the more I realize that not everyone got that. And I just become more and more appreciative. So I'm really, really grateful for what they did and just being there for me and actually giving me, the love I think anyone needs, like as they grow up, from a child to like an adult, right? So I think that's one thing. I think professionally, I think I've just been fortunate to have people in the right place at the right time. Like I never had like a mentor in the traditional sense where like, this is the person I check in with every so often, but I've been fortunate enough to be at, either in college or workplaces where I meet people and we start to talking and we just kind of like, hey, I'm thinking about this, and we bounce ideas on each other. And it ends up just kind of like helping me get in ultimately, winding up in the right direction. I have, I don't think I've taken the most direct path to where I am today. So there's definitely been some missteps, but I do think that generally along the way, I've been able to gather really, really good advice that ultimately helped me get into a position that I'm pretty happy with.
Okay. Well, final question. Maybe it came from one of these people who gave you some really good advice, but is there a quote you reflect on or that you mention to other people quite a lot that keeps you going, motivates you, inspires you?
Yeah. It's funny. I actually don't know where it came from, but it's something that I started saying maybe 5 or 6 years ago, when it's just kind of like stuck, and now some of my friends kind of know that I say it. Yeah. But it's never too late to be the person you want to be, and I try and use that as like an example to try new things, or to just learn new things, or to just try and be a better person the next day if I feel like like I just wasn't great today. It's just like
Yep.
I like the idea behind it, that like no matter how old you are or where you are in life, you can always use the next day to try and do better than the last. And I kind of appreciate that.
Okay. Nate, thank you very much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Chris. This was actually really fun.